Hey everyone, and welcome to Beyond Rent. Maintenance is a key component to any successful property management company. Whether you're handling it in-house or outsourcing it, there's a lot of challenges along the way. So we have Sam in studio recording the podcast with us today. He's from Midwest Expansion. He's going to give us some insights into what he does to have a successful maintenance program, specifically around how he uses the 5W method to do so. So we're really excited about today's conversation. And Sam, welcome to Beyond Rent.
Thank you so much for having me. This facility is awesome, and I just appreciate all the hospitality you guys have shown me in just the very small amount of time that I've been here. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We love having people in studio. And for anyone that's watching this or listening, part of coming out and doing this in studios, you get to kind of get a tour of our building and meet some of our people. So we've really enjoyed our day so far with Sam. And I'm really excited about not only having you here in person, but learning more about your experience with maintenance and how you're managing things. It is not something I envy. I've never done that job before, but every time somebody brings up maintenance, you can just tell there's a lot going on there. So super excited to learn more. But before we do that, let's make sure the audience knows who you are. So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you do there at Midwest Expansion.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Sam Heimerl, and I coordinate maintenance, and it's really difficult. At the end of the day, I wear a lot of hats, as I'm sure a lot of other property managers do. It's really difficult to define your position, but I'm considered a property manager, like I said, heavily in maintenance coordination. I help manage all of our maintenance requests from our tenants, as well as coordinating work with vendors, as well as scheduling like make-ready processes for when tenants move out. And all of that being said for multifamily and commercial.
And you're like a lot of our customers, you handle multiple different types of properties, or you said multifamily and commercial. So I think that's really interesting. And tell us a little bit more as far as how long you've been there with Midwest Expansion and maybe how large that portfolio is altogether.
Yeah. So I have been with Midwest Expansion since I was 15 years old. So I am currently 26. So just had my 10 year at the company, which is phenomenal. However, when I first started, I wasn't doing property management and I wasn't doing maintenance. When I first started, I was working at a local bowling alley that they owned, and started as you work at the counter and you give people shoes and you spray the shoes and whatnot. So it was very, very different. And then the bowling alley was great for me during when I was in high school and when I was in college because it was weekend hours. Okay. And then COVID hit years after that. And they were like, we like you. We want you to come help us out in the property management world. And I said, I have no idea what that is, what it's about. I didn't have any experience in property. In day one, they hooked my phone up and I started answering maintenance calls. And 10 minutes later, I got a call saying my toilet's not working. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And so since then, I have taken the mindset of like, I just need to figure this out. Even if I don't know much about it, I need to just figure it out. And so since then, I've made it a mission of mine to really take this as my baby and try to be the best at it. So
yeah, that's great. I talk to a lot of people, and there's lots of fun stories about how people get started in our industry, but none of them start with a bowling alley, right? So that's really unique. That's a lot of fun, but I think it really paints a picture of the fact that a lot of people that are in property management do a lot of different things, right? They're diverse business people. They have different things happening. And the fact that you, even as a teenager and young adult, must have shown a lot of ambition, a lot of work ethic, a lot of the characteristics that they knew they wanted to have within their organization. So big kudos to you, because a lot of people that age, and it is just a job. And when they move on, a lot of the times those companies don't even remember you because it was just a teenager that worked the front desk. But you left an impression.
No, and I really appreciate them for seeing that in me. It's also a family company, and I'm not a member of the family. But they have taken me in as one of their own, and they're usually pretty skeptical to hire people from the outside. And I think most family companies are like that because the way you conduct business with your family is much different than the average person, right? And like I said, they've taken me in as family, and I've been able to learn a lot from them as I've grown. And like you were saying, property management's one of those industries where I feel like you don't really just start. You somehow find your way in, and that's how you get in there. And some people hate it, and other people love it. I love the challenges that it brings. And like I said, we've only gotten bigger over the last 4 or 5 years, too. So,
no, that's great. You're absolutely right. Very few people think as a child or teenager, even in college, like, oh, I want to be in property management. It is one of those areas that people kind of fall into, they stumble into, they find it. But as you're experiencing, they almost never leave because it is a really great industry to be in. There is lots of opportunity. There's lots of challenges. And for people that like to overcome challenges, it's a great place to be because you can be a problem solver. And maybe that's where we kind of jump into the conversation, is to learn a little bit of how you overcame those challenges. So not having any experience in this industry, being early in your career, you're now put in a role where everyone is coming to you with their problems, right? Toilet's not working, sink is leaking, HVAC issues. It's always problems coming your way. That's a lot for a young adult to handle. So walk me through those early days, those early years of learning what it meant to be a maintenance coordinator and how you learned enough to be successful there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I first started, I had no systems in place, and I'm sure you hear from every expert out there, systems are what's really important. So we were doing everything pen and paper, phone calls, not tracking anything. And so I started in a Google spreadsheet, tracking issues, writing comments, writing notes. And then from there, I was able to figure out what it is that I really wanted in a maintenance coordination process. And I was able to move that over to Rent Manager and develop my systems there. But it really came down to I needed a method that, regardless of what systems that we were using, was going to help me. Whether at the time, we were new with Rent Manager. So we didn't know if Rent Manager was going to be our solution long-term, And so at the time, I needed to put together a method that would help me coordinate maintenance with our technicians and also vendors, regardless of what systems we were using. And I came down to a notebook and I wrote down the 5W method, which is a lot more simple than you may think. And I was explaining it to Joe earlier. It's the thing that's right in front of your face that you don't always think about. And it's who, what, when, where, and why. Everybody who is involved in the maintenance process, as soon as your tenant submits a maintenance request, and whether you're involving vendors or in-house technicians or somebody else, everybody who is involved needs to know who is involved, what is being done, where it is, when it's happening, and why it's happening. And it's human nature. The why is really important because human nature, we want to know what we're doing is purposeful. We want to feel like we are doing good. And I think it's really important for our technicians and our vendors to know why we want something done and why we want it done a certain way, if that makes sense. Like I think we make it a habit to tell somebody to do something and not give them a reason why. And because we don't give them a reason why, they don't share that same sense of urgency with us. So we've made it a point to really focus on that.
So there's so many great nuggets of information and ideas that you shared there. So I want to start by talking about the actual system that you put in place. And I actually really love that you said we weren't sure if Rent Manager was going to be our long-term solution. And it's been a number of years that you've been using our software at this point. So it sounds like it is now, but you didn't know then. And what I love about that, and I tell people this all the time, that when you are running a business, you have to operate at the way that is the most efficient, the most profitable, all of those things for you. And also you're in a market where you have competitors. So if you operate the same way that they operate, you really can't compete against them, right? You're doing the same things in the same way. So once you create your process, your system, it needs to be unique to you. And then your software needs to support your decision. And that's honestly where a lot of people get it flipped, right? They start with the software and they say, well, our software says that we have to do step 1 through 5 and it won't let us do it any other way. But we don't want to do it 1 through 5, but we're going to end up doing it that way only because the software requires it. And sometimes there are best practices. There are things that are regulations or fair housing that you really need to be careful with. But in general, creating your own systems that you know are scalable and that achieve the goals that you want to achieve and how you treat your residents and treat your vendors is really, really powerful. So I really, really love that. And then I want to dive into the why though. So maybe it's just me, but sometimes I don't give the why because I think it's obvious. I think I've already told you all of these other details. The why is right there. Do I really need to write it down and document it? Am I wrong in thinking that? Or is that kind of maybe the main issue is that we assume the why, but we're not communicating it?
Yeah. So I was in the same boat that you were when I first started. I made it a habit to assign tasks for people and schedule service and not give a why. And every business is different. I'll start by saying that every business and every company is different, and the way you run your business, you might not need a why. We have found that it is more useful to give people the purpose in every situation. Why is this so important? Why does it need to be done like this? And it also just gives a refresher on some of our policies and SOPs and stuff like that the day of. We're always reminding the people who are involved in the work, why do we do this? And ultimately, the reason is because we want to take care of our people. At the end of the day, in maintenance coordination, we want to take care of the people who live with us and who also pay our salaries and who keeps our company afloat. And I think that showing that purpose for our team members on a consistent basis really reminds them of why we do the things that we do. And at the end of the day, we resolve issues is what we do.
Yeah. And I know from where I sit working for a software company in this industry, I can very easily get disconnected from the why, from the purpose. We work in an industry where we focus on housing, and housing is really important. People need places to live. They need good places to live. But it's easy to get disconnected from that. And I imagine in maintenance is the same way, right?
Yep.
So walk me through what a why would look like. So you mentioned earlier, you got that call,
yep.
The toilet's not working. So you know the what, right?
Yep.
So walk me through the 5 W's and let's end with the why and what you would really tell somebody to make sure they understand the purpose behind that fix.
Yeah. So, when I say the 5W method, who, what, when, where, and why, it's not that in the description of the work order I'm writing who, what, when, where, and why, and I'm spelling that out for them. A lot of times systems like Rent Manager, which we appreciate, have a lot of that information already built in, like property links, tenant links, categories, things like that. A lot of that is already worked into there. The why necessarily isn't worked into there, and no company really includes the why, right? Like this is a spot to provide context on an issue, right? Like sometimes what the tenant requests from you, they might say, my garbage disposal is broken and I need you to replace it. That might be what is on the work order for our technician. And the technician might see that and they might just listen to them and they might replace the garbage disposal because that's what the tenant put in the work order, right? They might just listen to that. But what if there's a spot in the middle for why, for context that allows the coordinator to come in and say, we aren't going to replace the garbage disposal because first we do this, and it lists 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 our steps process on what we do in the situation of a garbage disposal is not working. Yes, we will replace it after we have tried steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So I think that has been really important for our company. That why is like, why do we do things the way that we do? And it ultimately saves us money in the long term, and it keeps our technicians in the loop because it gives them a clear roadmap of what needs to be done every single time they walk into an apartment. And they're busy. I mean, our technicians service several communities, within an hour range. They've got a lot of driving. They've got a lot of, actual hard physical labor ahead of them. And so what can we do as a company to give them the most information possible to make sure that they can resolve the issues in the long term and, keep our tenants satisfied?
Yeah, I think that's great because you're absolutely right. I mean, maintenance is a very difficult job. Again, I'm going to go back to that comment earlier. You're fixing problems all day long. And while people may be happy that you're showing up, they're not necessarily happy that you had to show up, right? Yep. They would have rather the thing not break in the first place so they didn't have to deal with it. So it is a challenging job. And I really just love this idea of talking about that why, because that context and going through, like, and you were saying, why do we have these steps? Why do we have these processes? There is a reason. There's an understanding in your company of why that's happening. And instead of telling people what to do, you're kind of empowering them to solve problems because you're guiding them through the steps.
For sure. I think you nailed it right on the head. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to provide as much independence as possible while also, making sure everything aligns within our company's values and our policies and everything like that. And the who, what, when, where, and why, and especially that why has allowed us to make sure that our values and our policies are being followed while also taking care of the tenant, treating them like people. Because at the end of the day, like, it's really easy for us to become detached from reality, especially if you sit behind a computer all day and you're pressing buttons, and to my other fellow maintenance coordinators out there, it can be really monotonous sometimes. You have your process of scheduling maintenance and you're clicking buttons on a screen and you forget that these are people and, they're tenants. And I'm sure you have been a tenant or own a house or have done something where you needed someone's help at some point. And, we owe it to our tenants to provide them a clear-cut system.
Yep, absolutely. So you have this process in place, this system. You're using technology to back it up. You're thinking about the tenant and resident experience through the whole process. But things don't always go according to plan. So how does your process help fix things when they go sideways, I guess, for lack of a better term, because things will go sideways in maintenance?
Yeah. So the reason I love my 5W method is because no matter what's happening or what the urgency is, it is equally important, right? But there does come a time where you hit the panic button. And every business has this, and I think some people are really afraid of it, but sometimes you need to know when to drop all of your systems, whatever you're doing, and just do everything you can to resolve the issue. And sometimes that means you just show up in person, and that means sometimes you might just call the tenant on the phone or the vendor on the phone. Sometimes you need to do absolutely whatever it needs to get done in order to resolve an issue. And I think that this is true for any system because the more of a system you have in place, the harder it is to overcome any nuances that show up, if that makes sense. Like, I'm sure Rent Manager sees this all the time with their product support, right? Where somebody runs into an issue that you guys have never seen before, and you have a certain system and, in certain departments you run certain things through, but you might just need to say, this is going to be someone's baby and I need them to figure it out. And we take that approach in certain situations, especially emergency situations where, maybe a vendor's not responding or, our technician is out sick and we don't have anybody, that 5W method works for the most part, but sometimes you just hit the panic button.
Yeah, I do like that idea. And you're absolutely right. I mean, there are situations where you go outside process, you kind of jump the line and you pull in somebody that can help fix the situation, even though you're not following the process. Correct. Because it is an emergency or there's just something that warrants that higher level. Now, how do you determine that? Because I think some people struggle with that. I mean, urgency is actually one of our core values. So we believe in reacting quickly to things, but there can be an overreaction sometimes because not everything can be an emergency. So how do you deem that on your side? Is it more of like empowering your team to just state what they think is an emergency, or is it more resident driven? Where's that line for you?
This is more resident driven. And, I say that because I'm sure people have residents out there who call and say, this is an emergency. And it's just, their garbage disposal not working, which is not an emergency, but to them it is, And so we really try to empower the tenant early on with our expectations. And so things like in our lease agreement and prior to the lease agreement, we give them emails, automated emails with proper documentation telling them, hey, this is what we expect from you as a resident. And I think a lot of management companies are also afraid to do that. Hey, as a resident here, this is what we expect from you, as well as here's what you can expect from us, And so we provide them as much information as possible. Like if you are having these issues, this is how long you can expect to wait, or this is how quick you can expect us to respond. And we've got a lot of good feedback on that. So I hope I answered your question there.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That it's really the resident that kind of drives that urgency.
Yep.
And when you need to go outside process. I'm really interested about what you just said as far as setting expectations for the length of time that something may take to get fixed, because it seems like that's a double-edged sword. Because if you set the expectation and you are better, right? People are very happy. But if you fall short and it takes longer, then they're going to hold you accountable to the expectation that you set. So are you setting those expectations every single time, or just in general, you've got some parameters that you let people know of?
In general, we have parameters that we let people know of. But if we run into situations like maybe we have a staffing shortage because we've got holidays coming up and people are taking vacation, or maybe we just had 2 people quit, or, there's situations like that. And for the most part, people are understanding, and we don't give them enough credit. If I tell them when I'm coordinating a maintenance request, we can't get there for 3 days, and I'm truly, truly sorry because we're battling this in-house, and you mean a lot to us, and we're really eager to resolve this. And if anything shows up quicker, you will be the first in line. I think people really appreciate that. And especially the last thing I said there with putting them on a wait list. Like, hey, if we have an opening sooner, we want to get you in. That ultimately shows them like you are urgent to resolve their issue, and you should be. And if the resident's mad at your response time, you know what? They're also right. Because put yourself in their shoes. If let's say they have a legitimate issue, let's say their washer isn't working and they can't wash their clothes, but they have a podcast episode coming up in 4 days and they need it, resolved as soon as possible. Put yourself in their shoes. Even though the circumstances of the company don't allow you to resolve it sooner, they don't care. And as the resident, their happiness should be the most important thing. And so, I hope I also answered your question.
Yeah, no, and I do agree. And I think setting expectations is important. And their happiness with their experience is important. And we hear all the time that, a lack of effective maintenance is a common reason people move. People don't want to move typically. Like there's life situations that happen, or if they need more space or they need a different job. In general, people want to stay where they're at if they like the community, if they like the home. So they don't want to go. But if there's a lot of maintenance issues, they will. So I think it is really, really important. Is there anything else that your team is doing when it comes to the communication part with residents or with staff or even with vendors that you feel like it's maybe a little bit different, or maybe the positioning that you do or the thought behind it that's a little bit different than maybe what you think some other people are doing?
Yeah. So the only other thing I can think about right now that we make it a point to think about during all of our processes is also the practicality of something. Management companies have a history of enforcing a lot of rules, and the tenants might not think it's very practical. And what we do is we try to think of, does this make sense for the average person who is living in an apartment? So, for example, we set our curtain rods in our living rooms at 95 inches to give a loftier look, okay? And when somebody uses them at 95 inches, their apartments look beautiful, okay? So the design behind our apartments is very well thought out. However, somebody moves in, they had to move in really quick because they didn't have time to see it, and they just got kicked out of their house. However it may happen. They come in with already purchased 84-inch curtains for their living room, right? It would be very easy for us to say, as a management company, sorry, that's the way it is, buy new curtains. That's not very practical to the tenant. They bought them a year ago. They just need the curtain rod moved, which is something that is certainly practical from a management standpoint, right? Like we have maintenance technicians who can adjust the height of those curtain rods for them so that they can use their 84-inch curtains during their stay. Things like that, we think about practicality, right? Like it's not practical for us to ask our tenant to go and get new curtains when we could just move them. At the end of the day, situations like that, we find just doing the extra thinking and making sure that what we're enforcing is also practical for our tenants and then also our vendors too.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great example because it would be very easy, again, sitting behind a computer to have this mindset of like, that isn't something we should have to do. You know, that's not a high priority for us. But what is that resident experience? So I think it's a phenomenal example because I do think a lot of people just look right past that and they would just say, no, we're not doing that and move on. But right out of the gate, that moving experience is now a bad experience for that resident. Yep. And they're going to remember that probably the whole time that they're there because they're either going to use the wrong size curtains and every time they look at them, they're going to be reminded the fact that you said no, or they're going to go spend additional money to get curtains that look better. And they're going to remember that too, because people remember when they have to spend money.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I think people want to feel taken care of, even if we can't do something for them. I think there needs to be a legitimate reason. You know, I think there is an expectation, from a maintenance department that you take care of your tenants, even if it's not necessarily a part of their lease, even though you don't have to. You should be taking care of the people who live with you and little things like that. And most of them are little things. Rarely are they big things. And the big things they'll understand.
When I think it makes sense from a standpoint of service too. When people are renting, I think there's this level of service that they expect, right? If I wanted to do my own maintenance, if I wanted to move my own curtain rods, I would purchase a home. Instead, I'm renting. I'm paying a premium typically to rent. So there is this expectation of a different level of service. So I love that your company's kind of focused in there. So another thing I want to learn more about from you today, Sam, is maybe some of the other things that you're doing as it relates to operationally around maintenance requests, as far as how you're handling them. Is this more of a centralized process or are you decentralized? Where are you managing it from? And how much technology are you applying to the process?
Yeah, great question. So I am a one-stop shop for coordinating maintenance right now. Our company right now has about 1,000 units of residential properties and probably another 500 to 600 in commercial. And that's a lot. But we've allowed Rent Manager to really drive our systems, right? Like we were talking about before, a lot of our values and systems that we tried to put in place, we tried to put in place before Rent Manager so that in case we didn't like Rent Manager, but we love it. That has allowed us to centralize our coordination process. So we have 7 to 8 apartment communities right now, all within about an hour of each other. Commercial properties are scattered quite a bit. And so it is hard to keep all of that information on pen and paper. So we use a lot of issue lists within Rent Manager to kind of control what some of the priorities are with some of those requests. And since I'm the one-stop shop, I'm talking to all of our technicians, I'm talking to all of our cleaners, we have groundskeepers, landscapers, there's a lot there. But technology has been, without a doubt, very important for our company.
Yeah, and anyone that I talk to that's scaling their business or really is finding success in maintenance coordination has really a lot of the same approach that you have, this idea of we're going to use technology to automate, streamline, organize all of our maintenance, but we need people to really step in and do the work and think about it and have a lot of those communication pieces. So obviously we've talked a lot about both sides of that. I really think that's the critical part of success is technology should just be driving everything in the background, but we need a face of maintenance. And that happens to be you in this situation, right? To make sure that people understand that there is a person that they can relate to.
Yep. People, and you hit it right on the head. People want to talk to people. Everybody, what they seem like they want to have everything automated for them, but nobody wants to be automated. Everybody wants that personal touch and everybody wants to feel special. And so I think we have to take that into account when we do automate some things. Like, not everything needs to be automated. At the end of the day, sometimes a phone call is best. It's very easy to say, no, everything has to be an email. And while I do think that's really important to make sure everything is documented, sometimes, hey, maybe just talk to them on the phone and send a follow-up email afterwards. Make sure that personal touch is there.
Yeah, it really does make a difference. Documentation is great, is powerful, but it only goes so far. And a lot of times through that conversation, you can get a sense of their tone better. You can understand how they actually feel about it. You kind of talked about earlier about, what's practical, what gets escalated, what's important. When you talk to somebody, you can sense whether it's important right away. You might get somebody submit a request. Yeah, my disposal isn't working, and it seems urgent based on what you're reading, but then you call them and they're like, yeah, no big deal. I'm actually going to be out of town for a week or two. So yeah, you can fix it next month. Like, you don't know that unless you have that conversation.
Exactly. No, I agree with you. And sometimes calling people, you get information that you didn't get in the email, like maybe somebody submits their maintenance request and says, my garbage disposal is broken. We're using that as an example, right? And, but then they call an hour later before you had a chance to really get to it. They call and they're like, yeah, I just submitted this, on my portal, but, I wanted to add that, it fell down and it cracked my sink and now there's water going everywhere. There's situations like that where, it's just easier to find context in a phone conversation. And I know it's really, really easy to push them off and say, no, you have to do it via email. Going back to what we said earlier, if you set those expectations that say, our expectation is that everything is documented. If they're calling you, there's a reason that there needs to be a phone call and you should answer.
Yeah, I would say, especially in our modern world, if somebody picks up the phone, there's a good reason they picked up the phone, right?
Yeah.
Text message versus a phone call, the urgency is very, very different there. And as we think about technology, I kind of have to ask, like, where's your mindset in kind of the future of maintenance coordination and really property management in general? You're using a lot of technology, but you still have that personal touch. Do you think in the next year, 3, 5 years, where's automation going? We can even talk a little bit about AI if you have any thoughts around, how those tools or features can maybe boost what you're already doing.
AI is phenomenal. It's something that I have grown passionate about in the last couple of years as it's, as ChatGPT has started to kind of come into wave. Now there seems like there's a lot more possibilities. I think in property management, there is a lot of things that we do repetitively that don't need the human touch. For example, in maintenance, right? There's every time an issue is closed, every time it's scheduled, there's certain notifications that our tenants want regardless, and they don't necessarily need that to come in the form of a human connection, right? I think AI is going to grow what those already automated notifications had the capabilities of. I think AI is going to take that to a whole nother level and allow there to be some sort of like, almost like a person that is managing that entire process, that isn't human, but still can provide all of that necessary information. But I don't think it's going to happen overnight. And I think it's going to take longer than we think to get to the point of an AI landlord, right? One machine that answers everybody's questions. Because sometimes people don't just want their questions answered. They want to be heard. And AI isn't going to hear your tenants, but people are. The people in your company are going to listen, because it goes back to that panic button where sometimes you just need to drop your systems and you need to resolve the issue at hand. And sometimes it's not as easy as technology is going to answer it.
Yeah, and the part that I pulled out there, you said that it's going to take it to the next level, kind of what we have now. I do agree. And you kind of mentioned that you are a one-stop shop for 1,000 plus units, residential, another 500 commercial. I could see one person being the maintenance quarter over double those number of units with AI kind of stepping in and helping with some of the lightweight communication, some of the automations and things like that. So I'm of the same mindset as you. I do think it's going to be a game changer. Will take a little bit longer. We're all building stuff. We're all working on it now, but it's going to take a little bit while to figure it out and figure it out in a way that really, really works for how we need it to work versus, just maybe sending out some emails, because those are really two different things.
Yes. And I want to touch a little bit on Dave's segment in the Rent Manager Conference, because I sat down in a session with, I believe it was Dave and Tony, and applaud to them, because this was a very hard session. They were catching shots from hundreds of Rent Manager users in the crowd and questions that they had to answer on the spot, particularly to AI and some of the stuff that Rent Manager is coming out with. Very difficult questions. And somebody had asked them where they see AI going in the next 5 to 10 years within Rent Manager. And it was a hard question to answer, because Dave was very adamant on making sure it's finished, making sure that whatever Rent Manager is putting out is a complete product and it is working one step at a time, not getting ahead of himself. Because it would be really easy for a software company to implement some AI and charge extra for it and, go, way above their means. But I really appreciated that Rent Manager kind of stood their ground and said, we're going to do it at the pace that it makes sense. And because there's so much, as you know, AI has so much capability, and it's really scary to think about. So I think it's only smart to take it one step at a time. But because of that, I mean, it feels like it's right here, but I feel like we're 10 to 15 years away from seeing fully automated maintenance departments and leasing offices. I think we are that far away from it, just because I feel like the more we learn about it, the more we don't know about it.
Yeah, and Sam, I think that's a great point. And like you said, at our user conference, Dave, our owner, talked about AI and the future of AI with Rent Manager, and we announced some features that we're going to be putting out there. And it really mirrors what you're saying there. Is we talked about very specific use cases of AI and how it's going to be used in those feature sets, instead of saying we're just going to apply AI to every part of the software, because there's a lot going on in any software, including ours, and you really want to make sure it's done right, and you want to make sure it's polished, and it really provides value. And there's certain areas where I think AI can step in and add instant value overnight. And you mentioned ChatGPT, and I always think that's like the entry level to AI. But if you're not using ChatGPT, that really will open up your mind of what the possibilities exist, because we can use that every day. But that really is kind of just entry level. So, okay, how do we take that? And then really, where can it like step in, automate, do some different tasks? Where can it maybe do things that humans really can't do very well at this point? So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. And I think once we get moving, I think the momentum could really take us in a lot of fun places.
I think you're right. And I think touching on ChatGPT, I use it. I'm sure a lot of people use it. At the end of the day, don't look at it as you're trying to fake something across to your tenant. Look at it as you owe your tenant a perfected response. That's the way I look at it. And don't take ChatGPT at 100%. You can copy and paste what they say, but you need to adjust it into your own words. But I think that as AI progresses, over these next 5, 10 to 15 years, I think those little piece by piece implementations of it will allow people to understand it better. And so when we do get to the point of a fully fledged AI system that controls everything, right? The people who work in the company using it will understand how it works better, rather than having something that is completely controlling your company and nobody really knows anything about it. That's really scary to me. But as we implement piece by piece, I think that people will get a better understanding of it, and it won't be so scary when we get to that point.
Yeah, that's a great point. You really have to understand how a system's working to make sure it's meeting what you want, because the bottom line is we all have different mission statements or vision for our companies, things like that. And you have to make sure that technology is taking you there, not maybe where it wants to take you. So no, those are all great points. Well, Sam, as we kind of turn the bend at the end of our episode here, I want to make sure you have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about yourself, how people can connect with you, maybe learn more about Midwest expansion.
Yeah, if anybody wants to reach out to me and talk more about it, I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I just love talking property management. And if you want to talk more about it, you guys can reach me on LinkedIn, Samuel Heimerl, Heim as in Mary, ERL is my last name. I'm also really active on the Rent Manager Facebook group. So if you guys are on there, you'll probably see my name at some point. I know me and Curtis like to respond to everything. Lee Haynes also responds to a lot of other stuff. So you guys can get me on either of those. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I really appreciate you coming to Cincinnati here in our office to record this episode. Again, maintenance is really important. And even if you're not in maintenance, one of the things that I hope that you take away from this is this idea of having a simple mindset when it comes to your systems and applying that to how you want to conduct business. And again, we all have different visions and mission statements and things like that, but decide how you want to operate your business and build your systems around that. And Sam, I think you've done a phenomenal job doing that.
Thanks for the credit, Joe. And thanks for hosting and for having me here in Cincinnati. This has been awesome, a phenomenal experience. And I'm honored to be on this podcast.
Yeah, no, we appreciate your time. And we always appreciate your time as well, the audience listening to and watching another episode of the podcast here. We're always trying to find new topics and new people to have. And so always thankful for people that are willing to come out and visit us in studio. And until next time, keep going Beyond Rent.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Beyond Rent. If you enjoyed this podcast, spread the word on social media and with your peers in the industry. To be notified when more episodes are released, subscribe using your favorite podcast player. Beyond Rent is brought to you by Rent Manager Property Management Software. Learn more about Rent Manager's industry-leading software solutions at rentmanager.com. Until next time, keep going Beyond Rent.